Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Terra Madre Forum on Open Cities, Inclusive Communities. Before we begin, I would like to give you some information on this event. The forum is a webinar, so the mics and the videos of all participants will be switched off for the entire event. The first part of the forum will be devoted to the presentations of our panelists, and then we are going to have 15 minutes for questions and answers. You can send your questions if you wish using the chat. For those who are connected in Zoom, you can have the translation in Italian, English, French, and Spanish. To activate the translation, choose the desired language from the globe icon that you see on the bottom of your screen. For Italian, you have to choose Korean though. Also, we are streaming this event on the website of Terra Madre Salone del Gusto and on the YouTube channel of Slow Food. Irene from Housatonic is going to be with us as well. She's going to give us a graphical representation of our event. So now I'm going to introduce the chair of this forum, Matteo Brambilla. Matteo is a consultant of the Kefare project and he's also the author of the survey Cities from the Future. He's also contributed to the creation of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact and of the policy of the municipality of Milan. I'm happy to give him the floor and I wish you all a good forum. Thank you very much. Good evening everyone, and thank you first of all. Tonight we are going to spend 1 hour together to talk about today's topic, namely open cities, inclusive communities. We are going to focus on urban centers because for quite a few years now, we have become aware of the fact that urban centers will become the places with the highest density of population in the world. About 70 to 80% of the world population in the next decades will concentrate in cities. This topic related to food is also highlighted by 2 Sustainable Development Goals. Number 2, in particular, that focuses on access to food with the goal of ending hunger, and then the SDG number 11 on cities. Among the goals it mentions, it also has one on the creation of systems to create connections between the urban areas, the peripheries, and the farming areas around it that can create positive outcomes. So, first of all, we are going to talk about access to food. Many organizations, in fact, most organizations at the global level, believe that access to food is the most urgent problem to solve when we talk about urban contexts. Given the density of population that I mentioned before, of course, that also entails a high concentration of poverty. So the topic of access is key, and it is at the basis of any reasoning that you can do about food. Food, however, also, especially in urban contexts, where there is a mix of social layers of cultures and contexts, well, food can also become an exceptional sort of translator or common point. shared by different cultures that, of course, have a relationship with food. So starting from food, different cultures can find common points, things to share, even when this might seem unexpected. Another topic that, of course, has a huge impact on everyone's life, and it is also one of the reasons why we are in front of a screen right now and we're not physically meeting, is the topic of COVID, of course. COVID has been a formidable measure of inequalities. It has brought out inequalities also in terms of access to food. Not only that, sadly, COVID-19 has also been a catalyzer. It has set in motion some dynamics that already existed in terms of inequalities, and in particular in relation to food. They have emerged with a huge strength in the past few months. Today, we are going to talk in particular about practices that come from the experiences of slow food communities around the world. So we are going to hear from three panelists. They will give us their 3 points of view, their 3 perspectives, and they will talk about the issue of access to food and food as a tool for inclusion. We're going to have Barbara Piero, Dino Babic, and then Jean-Marie Colga. I apologize for my French pronunciation because French is not my strongest language, so I apologize if I have pronounced it wrong. Now, I'm happy to give the floor to Barbara, first of all. She is the founder of the Chi Rom Chi No Association that works in the heart of Scampia. Scampia is a neighborhood in the city of Naples, and Barbara is going to tell us about her experience. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this invitation. I am very excited. In fact, we are very excited because I'm here to speak on behalf of my entire community that involves many people, starting from a complex neighborhood in the periphery of the city of Naples, in the outskirts, often in mainstream media in Italy and abroad as well. Scampia, this neighborhood, is portrayed in very negative terms. Scampia is an area with 60,000 citizens. It is 6 kilometers away from the city center, but this distance, this physical distance, is not the same as the distance in terms of perception that people have of this neighborhood. The neighborhood was colonized by Camorra, by organized crime. The Camorra has found a fertile soil in the absence of the state in terms of infrastructures, labor, and meeting opportunities. Scampia, unfortunately, has a sad primate because it is the neighborhood with the highest rate of minor unemployment. About 46% of young people are unemployed. It is also the neighborhood with the highest rate of youth in general, with the highest number of associations as well. This is in contrast with the normal perception that people have of the neighborhood. However, it is a complex area. Often, Scampia is portrayed in simple terms, simplifying the phenomena of our city. Instead, it is a complex context. Our experience as Chi Rom Chi No was created about 6 years ago. The name Chi Rom Chi No has 2 meanings. So first of all, it comes from the Neapolitan dialect. Chi Rom means those who sleep. So it makes reference to the need to wake up and to awaken consciences. As Goya says, it's sleep that generates monsters. It takes to activate, to step in, to create change, the change that we like to see in the world. In a neighborhood like Scampia, people know that you can't expect anything from institutions, that institutions are not close to people. They know it. Instead, institutions are often very distant, and sometimes they can become an obstacle to development processes. Chi Rom also makes reference to the Roma community. Rom is the Italian word for Roma. The Scampia neighborhood is rather young. It is inhabited also by 2 communities, the Neapolitan community that comes to the neighborhood, is an expansion of Naples. Also, after the earthquake, people moved to Scampia in the 80s, but also the Roma community at the end of the 70s came to Scampia, especially and at the end of the 80s, numbers increased. When the ethnic conflicts in former Yugoslavia began, Roma came to Scampia from former Yugoslavia. None of these two communities are indigenous, really, because they were both migrating from other places and they both came to a neighborhood which wasn't designed and built for citizens. So our action starts from the creation of a public space in a non-authorized Roma camp in Scampia. And we call this space a public space because, let's say, wanted to break the dichotomy between the center and the periphery. Often camps are considered a non-space. We want to call it a public space based on relationships. We wanted to go beyond the stereotypes and get to know people. So we launched several activities ranging from theater workshops, open air cinemas in a place that people didn't like to approach. One of the most enlightening experiences in this 10-year project was the experience related to food. Spending entire days at the camp and organizing events open to citizens, we often welcomed people who came to the camp, setting up big tables and putting out all the food. We asked the mothers we followed in particular, we asked them to prepare their food that could be offered as a gift to others, as a way to welcome people to the camp. Now, this approach, this opportunity to create a relationship, had an effect that went beyond our expectations. Faced with this stereotype of meeting Roma people and inhabitants of Scampia, people had to change their mind. I mean, the Roma camp is the periphery of Scampia, but Scampia is the periphery of Naples. I'm not talking about 20 years ago, but even now, there are very strong stereotypes when people get to Scampia. People still believe it is a barbaric place where you have to be careful when you walk along the street. So prejudice is very strong, but food has become a very powerful instrument because it goes beyond stereotypes, it brings people together, and it also creates that relaxed mood, that relaxed atmosphere that helps people get close to each other. You know, in front of a tasty moussaka or a wonderful pastiera, people on the guard and they could look each other in the eye and see the same human being, the same frailties, the same potentials, and somehow the same desires as well that were shared by kids and adults alike. In particular, within the communities we work with, women have always been an engine. They've always been able to accept the challenge and develop that curiosity that led us to look beyond the difficulties of everyday life. So we started a process called compania. Compania in the Roma language and in the Neapolitan have the same meaning. It's a group. It's a group of people that brought together with an aim. In this case, the goal, the aim was twofold. On the one hand, we wanted to create a group that was based on dialogue, on being a team. All these women came from a different background from their new life, and often they were not able to follow their ambitions. Scampia is a difficult neighborhood. There are no opportunities to create, to grow and to have social meetings, etc. So there was one A, but also the women in the group share the passion for food. They share the passion for cooking, and so these we created this group of women, this group called Compania. We also won international awards, and it became the first the social enterprise working in the field of multicultural gastronomy. We use the food as an instrument to create relationship and also to fight, have dreams and visions. And then if you want, I can tell you more about it if there are any more questions. Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you. Uh, you mentioned if we have more time. Well, as we explained before, we're going to listen to your presentations first, but then we are going to have time for Q&A. So people in the audience can ask questions in the chat, and then we will have the chance to ask them to our presenters, our panelists. I'm not going to go back to all the things that you've just said, but I think you've been very, very clear in your presentation. Now, I'm happy to give the floor now to Dino. Dino Babic is the president of the European Project Association and also of the Informo Croatian Association of Istrian de Dignan in Dignano. Again, I apologize for the bad pronunciation, but most importantly, he manages, among other things, the Eco Museum of Social Entrepreneurship, and is going to tell us something more about it. And is going to explain the role of food in this project. So thank you, and I give the floor to Dino now. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I am very happy that I have the chance to present what we are doing with our small community in Dignano d'Istria in Croatia to Terra Madre. Diognan would be the right Croatian pronunciation. So we've been working for years to create something important to preserve our traditions. We started with an association called the Istrian Eco Museum of Dignano. The idea is to save what can be saved as far as what our fathers and forefathers lived in their daily lives and which today is disappearing due to modern habits. Now, the value of all these habits start from food, but also it's about valorizing the resources of our territory. If we think of the quality of life, we start from air, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat. These are the main factors that contribute to our quality of life. Without them, human beings cannot even exist. We cannot live. So because for the moment, our air is pretty good, and we have water and we have wine as well. So we've decided to focus on food. There are volunteers, the European Solidarity Corps volunteers who come and stay with us for 1 year. And they are the pulsing engine of our association. These extraordinary friends who have been coming to us for many, many years now have helped us grow our community. And they've also brought with them the experience of the values, the resources of our territory. They've become ambassadors of what Istria is all about. They are ambassadors of Dignan in the world. Thanks to them, we've been able to create great projects. We have an educational farm in the elementary school of Dignano, where children from the windows of their school can see all the indigenous breeds of animals that our grandfathers and fathers used to breed and have in their courtyards and homes. They are endangered species often. We have the Istrian beef called Buscarin. We have the Istrian chickens, they also exist. We have the Istrian goat, which is the symbol of Istria. We also have sheep. They are quite peculiar breeds. Now, these indigenous breeds don't really have a huge value in terms of productivity for their meat and for food. They are carrying animals, they carry loads, they are poorer breeds, and so they have been abandoned over time. Now with this project we now have the ability, the opportunity to give our kids the opportunity to live a different future. At this educational farm, we also have a beautiful garden, and we also have a garden of herbs with medicinal herbs as well. We have also created a processing lab with a tasting room and a little shop. And we've also created a so-called House of Traditions. It's a journey through time where you can see all the utensils and all the tools that people used to have in their homes and they used every day. We've also created a workshop to recycle products. It has a wood shop, so kids work to repair old utensils to set them back in motion. And so we try and use the old utensils and instruments. We try and include the main resources of our community in all that we do. So we involve people with disabilities, both physical and psychological disabilities. We also have the huge resource of having people from risk groups, groups at risk. When we select our volunteers, we give priority to people who come from um, situations and countries that are at risk. We've involved people who are often underestimated, and they now produce excellent products. Our school is an internationally certified school. Our products are organic certified. We gather spontaneous medicinal herbs, and the members of our center for rehabilitation and integration come and gather the spontaneous herbs. So we teach them what plants grow in our area. They can produce extracts and amazing products. Sometimes we also produce some dyes from the herbs, and they produce wonderful, beautiful works of art. I would like to show you some photos to accompany my last words and to really show you the beautiful faces of the people who contribute to our work on a daily basis. Just give me a minute so that I can upload the photographs. So I hope that you can see them. So can you see the photos? This is Emilio in the kitchen. And Emilio and Sandro, together with them, we've also worked on the Good Farming, Good Food campaign. They have become excellent chefs, and they prepare our products and they present them in a beautiful way. They also work in the garden, and they are irreplaceable. You wouldn't think that they could contribute that much, but they can, and they are great at presenting what they do. They make excellent products, and they are truly very passionate about what they do and their work. They participate in all of our activities. They never step back. With the donkeys that you see here, we've looked for another function. They produce meat and milk, but they have a social function as well. Donkey therapy has become a true innovation for our area. They can help children on the autistic spectrum, and they help them create a spontaneous relationship with an animal. That means a lot for many, many families. This is our Istrian ox. It's huge. It almost looks like a rhino. It's quite impressive, but it's so tame that the children are the first to get close to him. With elementary schools, we are creating great projects. They are passionate about what they do, and we do many, many things. Before the coronavirus, our little square looked like this. Unfortunately, now we have to work remotely. These are the people from the rehabilitation center. They use flowers and plants to print on silk, as you can see here. And donkey therapy has helped them greatly. Unfortunately, now because of the pandemic, again, we have to reduce our activities. But we know that the most important thing is, we see these people who are unable to work because otherwise they wouldn't get all the aids, but they are artists, and it's a huge satisfaction to see them when a community appreciates these people and supports them. It's wonderful. This is a friend of ours who unfortunately passed away during the lockdown period, and I think that she's really given a lot of smiles. I mean, I'm shivering right now thinking of her, but I am sure that we did a lot for her and she did a lot for us. And I think that, we've done a lot for all the people in the rehabilitation center. We cook everything that we harvest in our garden, and the children who see people with disabilities and they experience it in a very spontaneous way, I think they grow up in a different way. I mean, it's certainly a different experience from ours. We try and do our best. These are the volunteers from this year's group. And I would like to close with these photographs because it's thanks to them that we are able to do this much in our small city. Dignano is a small uh, place, but for the Croatian administrative system, it is called a city. And we try and create an urban and rural regeneration that starts from nature. So slow food has acknowledged us. The University for Gastronomic Sciences came to us to visit. Now we've created a slow food community, and we have realized that we've always been slow food, really, even before we were acknowledged as such. We are very young. We only have 2 years experience as an official slow food community, but we fully identify with the values of this amazing initiative. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dino. You've been perfect in terms of timing as well. And thank you for your contribution and your presentation. Talking about communities, now we move on to our last panelist today. The last panelist, Jean-Marie Colga. He is a social educator and activist in the field of agroecology and sustainable development. He's also an international board member of Slow Food, and also is the coordinator of the Slow Food Network in Burkina Faso. So now I give the floor to Jean-Marie. And once again, I apologize if I have mispronounced your name, and we'll see you after your presentation. Thank you, Jean-Marie. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Matteo. And good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting me to this interesting Terra Madre virtual uh, meeting. It's a great pleasure for me to participate in this place and to share the experience of the African cities and the place where I live, Burkina Faso. First of all, I would like to say that the activities that we carry out here makes us better understand the differences between cities and the countryside in Africa. You know that we've inherited a colonial history, and today the cities in Africa, because of our colonial past, are separated from the countryside. Cities are characterized by fast food and fast life, a sort of a Western style lifestyle. We all try to live like the West, and so we unfortunately suffer from malnutrition. There's also this rush to earn money or financial gain, and there's also a lot of individualism, there's not a lot of place for communities. What matters is this individual and not the community, not the groups. And also we see irresponsible consumption and excessive consumption of a lacking of sharing. There's no hospitality anymore. There's indifference. Sometimes our local products are even despised. So this is what we see in the cities. We tend to run after a Western style of life, and so cities are becoming inhumane more and more. Also, food is quite expensive because a lot of food is imported. We eat a lot of industrial food, and costs are often inaccessible to people who have a lower purchasing power. And this means that in Africa, this is a situation of cities. We see a huge difference between the countryside and the cities. And with the COVID-19, in terms of food, we have seen really that those who have suffered the most are those who are rich and who live in cities, because they do not have local food. They rely on imported food. Instead, people who live in the countryside have their local products. So in order for cities to be more humane and welcoming, what do we need to do? Well, first of all, we need to be able to work in order to ensure the availability of food in the cities. But what food? Because it's not just enough to have availability of food, but we need to have locally produced food that is available in the cities, and we need to ensure accessibility to food for everyone. So availability for all and accessibility for all. That's when everyone will live better in the cities. To this purpose, today we need some policies that have to be developed. The first of these policies that we have identified is the promotion and improvement of local consumption. Today, cities have to go back to consuming local products, so local food, and we need to put the focus on agroecology. If cities are able to eat just like the countryside does, then the situation will certainly improve. And because at the moment, cities are very much detached from the countryside. So we believe that it is very important and necessary to promote local consumption. So we need significant policies to support and make sure that urban agriculture can be promoted. I'm thinking of market gardens or school gardens, community gardens, using hydroponic techniques, or we can use mobile gardens to compensate for the lack of space. As slow food, this is what we are trying to develop. We already have some school gardens, some community gardens, and we've already created some groups that produce food in the city. We need, as I said, to promote local production, urban agriculture, agroecological production. So that all is also a very important uh, aspect in order to ensure sustainable development, relying on local indigenous knowledge and cultural practices that support the soil. It The role of gardens is important, but restaurants also have an important role to play. It would be important to have social and local restaurants that produce dishes made with local products, because that would help accessibility and would help people to eat properly. When we promote local consumption, that also means producing and supporting local products. We also need to promote cultural identity and food identity. In our city, often people believe that eating local products from the countryside is sort of humiliating. They kind of despise it. And so most people eat imported products. They feel that it's more prestigious. they might take it as a sign of development, but really that's not true at all. So we believe it is important to promote this cultural identity so that cities and the countryside have access to the same food, the same nutrition, so that people who live in the city can access the same kind of food. Uh, Also, gardens in the cities are a way to create social environments. When local products are served in restaurants, that makes people rediscover food, and people are proud to rediscover what they ate when they lived in the village. They find it again in the cities, they find it again in restaurants, and that creates a pride. People acknowledge that local food is good. So these are important policies. So gardens, restaurants, processing groups, they're all important actors. It can bring the city and the countryside closer together. So solidarity is important, and we believe that an important tool that we could develop is that of having canteens or cafeterias in schools that cook local food instead of imported food, so that kids can go to school and learn their culture, learn about their local food, and eat their local food. So having canteens and cafeterias that rely on local products and local food is a very important policy. We are now asking local administrations to integrate the consumption of local food also in the public meetings, in the meetings of the administrations, because again, that helps and understand the importance of local products. We believe that this is really going to contribute to making cities more welcoming, more humane, so that even people who move to the city from the countryside can feel at ease. They don't feel alienated, but they can find um, what they are used to in the city as well. Again, we need to work on accessibility, availability of food to make sure that people can feel more at ease. We believe that with COVID-19, everybody has a knowledge and recognized that we cannot despise and forget local products because they are so important for our life. If we don't have food sovereignty, we cannot really be free and independent. And I think that COVID-19 has made us aware of this. So we believe that the policies I've just mentioned are extremely important. We have implemented several practices like charity canteens or donations, but we have to acknowledge that often these practices, they are good, or I'm thinking also of cultural exchange with migrant communities, but they are only temporary. They cannot last very long. They cannot be sustained over the long term. It's very difficult. So we believe that it takes to implement other practices. The practices I mentioned often create or maintain dependence, and they don't allow for the full development of people. They often create stigmatization or marginalization. Instead, we need practices that value individuals and promotes independence and ensure sustainability. So I believe that promoting good, clean, fair food can help us achieve the goal of a more humane cities and urban areas, cities that are more open, egalitarian, hospital, where the poor and the rich can all sit at the same table to eat exactly the same food without feeling any complexes. And also the COVID-19 crisis has shown the relevance of all of this. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Marie. Very clear in your presentation. Now, I would like to start with some questions. I have the same question for all of you. and I'm sure I'm going to get different answers because of your different perspectives. We have heard three different profiles, which of course are related to your practices in your territories. We've heard interesting facets, but we don't have much time, so I'm going to be very strict. I mean, by the way, it's difficult to sit in front of a screen. So out of respect for people who are watching us, let's try and be short. Here's the question. The food we've talked about, all of us, we've all talked about sustainable, good, clean and fair food. How can we make it accessible to everyone? This is the question that I believe can be a fil rouge in what you said. I'm thinking both in terms of practices, but also in terms of policies. So here's the question. How can we make sustainable food, good food, more accessible to everyone? So I would follow the same order, and so I would give the floor to Barbara first. Well, you mentioned the fact that during the pandemic, some topics have emerged and become more relevant, including the issue of access to food. From our point of view, which is a privileged one because we are in tight contact with people, we see that first of all, there's an issue of access to food. Our region, the Campania region, has a primate because it is the European region with the highest rate of pediatric obesity, which means that immediate access that people have to food, especially in childhood, is to junk food. There are two factors. First of all, there's a cultural aspect. It has to do with mainstream communication, which then impacts on their tastes, on the vision that families have of food. But there's a second factor as well. So, of course, policies on food, on the food industrial and capitalist production have a strong influence in determining what people perceive as good food. And then there's a second problem. Good food is expensive, and this is even more true in cities than in the countryside. The countryside is very far away from city centers, and in the cities, there's a difficulty in accessing good food for economic reasons as well. So the strategies to follow have to do, first of all, with the cultural aspect, but also at the same time with the economic one. So first of all, we have to tackle the sort of capitalist approach to food that offers a certain model with a top-down approach. We basically follow what multinationals tell us, and then we have an economic issue in access to food. Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. Dino. Well, I come from a smaller place. It's not a big city. I mean, we're very different from Naples. Our region has 208,000 inhabitants, and it's a small triangle, a small peninsula. This is Istria. The biggest city has 65,000 inhabitants. This is the biggest one. In administrative terms, my village is called a city, but that might sound strange to you. We have 4,000 people, but we are still called a city in Istria. And with hamlets, maybe 6,800 altogether. So access, we might think that access is easier, but we might think that access to the products of the earth is more spontaneous, is easier, but that is not the case. We now have a big problem because there's no production anymore. There's no production of vegetables. It's not profitable for anyone. We don't know where to sell vegetables. Prices of products that we find in supermarkets don't make it profitable for people to farm and to produce fruit and vegetables. So even people who live in the countryside often shop in the city. They sleep in villages, but they work in the city. and even in small villages, you find a shopping mall. So we've started from a different perspective. We want to go back to what might be a relationship with nature, with the natural processes that start from us. We want to feel a need and a desire. This is necessary to then set a priority that takes you to make a certain choice. So the children that we try and involve and sort of initiate to the practice of seeing, hearing, practicing all the senses through good food, starting from seeds, and then tasting the dish. This approach, this initiation tries and create a different awareness of what is dirty and what is clean. If they might be careful and not get their shoes dirty when they come to the farm, but they should really think about what they are stepping on, because maybe if they step on a herb, you know, that's a damage. Bay leaves in Germany might even be €3, whereas in Istria, bay shrubs are everywhere. Children are surrounded by resources that they are not even aware of, and creating this awareness is the priority, is the main mission for us. We know that we can just set the example with what we do. We are just doing small things that's not going to impact on access to products. We produce very little, but we try and produce what we know we are going to eat. We don't want to create any waste, and we donate whatever we don't consume to do good. But what we want to do mainly is to make our farms accessible to people who are in a wheelchair. We have floored. We don't like concrete, but we had to create a floor to make sure that the people in a wheelchair could access raised beds as well as the stables. And we think that people must feel a need and desire and then go and search for the food. The food is there. Good food is there, can be found. You can gather a lot of spontaneous plants and herbs. We have the ministerial authorization to collect and gather protected plants as well. We create infusions, etc. But that needs to start from an inner desire. Those who try our products, well, they're happy to consume them. They might not go search for them, but if they find them, they are happy to consume them. We work a lot with producers as well to make them aware that by producing something good, something special, they can attract the attention of people, not only on the product, but also they can attract attention to the values behind a certain product. And I think that this is our way of working. It might not have a huge global impact, but it can be a starting point. And we see good results, positive results. Thank you very much, Dino. Your contribution is very valuable. So thank you for your ability to scale down your experience and to give us the context of your environment. Of course, it's a different scale, but it's good to acknowledge that even smaller scales can generate positive results. The impact created is not necessarily related to the number of people who are involved. It's seeds that we are planting, as Barbara said as well. It's important from a cultural point of view as well. I think that this is a common point that I have found in both your answers. Now I give it to Jean-Marie. Again, the question is the same. Thank you very much. The mic, please. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we put the focus on the political and practical aspect. At the moment, the political aspect is very important because it sets the dynamics. The policies create a vision. In Burkina Faso, for instance, Thomas Sankara is our president, and in the 80s, it pushed a dynamic indigenous development. He said that we had to produce Burkinabe products and eat Burkinabe products from the Burkina Faso. And that has pushed the population towards that approach. In other words, promoting local products, local food. The President Thomas Sankara has really given Burkina Faso a strong motivation to focus on local food. So if politics, if policies give the stimulus and promote what is local, that would be very, very important. That would be exceptional. And our advocacy, our work is to this purpose. We want politicians who are committed in this sense. And then in terms of practices, well, there are cities where we already, unfortunately, production doesn't take into account local products. We still see the dominance of imported products. There's no agroecology. Even in gardens, we find imported products and not local ones. So if we have this, as I said, we have a history of colonization. So now the approach, the way of thinking is that we want to look like the West. We want to be like the West. We look up to the West, but instead politics should reverse this and instead promote what is local so that it can then be translated into practical action, so that producing, processing and eating products and be focused on quality and what is local. This is what we are doing here. We are trying to make people aware of the importance of agroecology, how important it is to promote local production, local products, and we want to implement practices that are not destructive of the soil and of the health of our soil and animals. We need to work towards sustainability and the respect for the environment. So we think we need to work at the level of politics and policies and at the practical level in order to have cities that are more humane and more welcoming. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Marie. Let's close with one more question. We don't have much time, so we only have 1 minute to answer this, but it's a very short question, by the way. It's not easy, but it's short. Here's the question. Let's go back to the beginning. We talked about inclusion. So I would like to ask you, from your point of view, why is food a tool that is inclusive? What is the superpower of food in terms of inclusion? It is very clear to everyone that food is inclusive. You all mentioned it. So in 1 minute, what is the superpower of food? In your perspective, why is food so inclusive? What is the superpower of food? Well, first of all, food creates pleasure. In Naples, we have a very intimate relationship to food. And then what is better than sitting around a table where you can sit next to each other, in front of each other, and have a common research, shared experience. Thank you very much, Barbara. Dino? No, not your turn yet. Dino first, and then we'll close with you, Jean-Marie. Thank you. Okay. Yes, superpower of food, I think, is the fact that we all eat. And sometimes we have the impression that someone eats better than others. We work the earth. And for all producers in our community, though, the most important thing that we do is our product. That's what matters the most. That's our work of art. What we do is that we give space to the initiatives of individuals. We are a platform for whoever wants to develop an activity or a project, and we give visibility all together to the products of our region, of our territory, and we present them to visitors. So we try and amplify the pleasure that making the product gives to us by disseminating and spreading that same emotion, that same excitement. We've also tried to let people taste the recipes and the food of the past, the ancient traditions. So pleasure can travel in time as well, and it can spread in space. So it is a superpower. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's close with Jean-Marie. Well, thank you. I think that the power of food is very clear, especially in our African context. We say that food is cultural more than anything in Africa. And when we have food, I mean, there's something that we find in culture, it's part of the culture. And producing and eating, I mean, food culture is very inclusive. We have people who process food, restaurants who cook local food, and that brings people together. So it's a socializing experience as well. It's a matter of sharing. When we have food, when I come to Italy from Burkina Faso and I find some food that I like, I'm happy to see people who eat the food from my culture. It's something that I appreciate when I see it in other countries. So food is something that is creates a community. Communities identify in food. Communities are created by food. It's very important. So I do believe that food is central. It's cool. It's its core. It is a tool for inclusion and to create communities. Thank you. Great. Thank you all. I think that you've all used some keywords in your answers. You've all mentioned pleasure, pleasure that also becomes the foundation to build communities. And, people who enjoy the same pleasure, it's something that, is shared by a community. And then you've also added another aspect, namely food as a plastic expression of the result of someone's work throughout the process, production, transformation, etc. So, I mean, these are nice superpowers, I would say. Very, very good superpowers. We have a couple of minutes left, maybe, but I think we've touched on all the main points that we wanted to talk about. And so maybe we can go towards the end and the conclusion of this forum. I would like to thank Barbara, Dino, Jean-Marie, and Slow Food. I think that we've been able to bring out many interesting facets of food. In the past few decades, food has been attacked as well by policies and dynamics that have then given shape to current society. But if we start from the idea of pleasure, if you look at food as the result of the work of a group of people who work together, that could take us to the accessibility that we mentioned in the beginning. Thank you once again for participating and enjoy your evening. Thank you very much to you all.
Act together for the common good. Go to donate.slowfood.com/en and follow us at terramadreselunadelgusta.com.